Welcome back. On your screens are visuals of the Prime Minister landing in Sweden. The Prime Minister has just landed, which is the third nation in his 5-nation tour. This is the third leg of the Prime Minister's 5-nation tour. The Prime Minister's visit will include official discussions with his Swedish counterpart and delegation-level talks aimed at strengthening bilateral cooperation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also interact with the members of the European Roundtable for Industry, which comprises leading CEOs from across Europe. Those are live visuals of the Prime Minister receiving a warm welcome from the Swedish Prime Minister, Mr. Kristersson. As far as Prime Minister's third leg of the 5-nation tour is concerned, this engagement also is the first visit to the continent since the India-European Union Free Trade Agreement. Let's go across to Srinjoy, is joining us in the broadcast with more details. Apart from, of course, deepening alliance, this is also the Prime Minister's first visit to the continent after the FTA with the European Union, Srinjoy.
Yes, apart from that, this is Prime Minister's second visit to Sweden, the first since 2018 when he came for the Nordic Summit. Now, this visit is particularly important for a variety of reasons. Innovation is one. Once again, the Swedes have some niche technologies which can be very helpful. The other thing is green technologies. Now, this is again something the Norwegians and the Swedes have been very good at. So as a result, this can be something that both countries can work together on. Besides that, as you rightly said, this is a visit since the FTA. Now, for all the Nordic countries, which have very small populations, in comparison, the Swedes have a larger population of 10, 11 million. So it is much easier. Therefore, also importantly, the Swedes are good in defense. Let's not forget, Bofors was a Swedish gun. But that, of course, is in the past. At this point, the Swedes are very good with some weapons, which they've already begun manufacturing in India, like the Carl Gustaf. That's a very useful weapon for the Indian Army, the infantry particularly, and it has been with the Indian Army for many years. Now, a newer version is now being manufactured in Haryana. The idea of this visit, one of the things that both countries will look at, is taking this process forward in the sense that there could be more joint production of Swedish weapons in India and then subsequently used by the Indian Army and the additional amounts exported to other friendly countries. So all of this is on the agenda. Innovation, green technology, weapons, defense, all of that. And naturally issues that relate to Ukraine and Russia will also come up in the discussions. The Swedes have always been neutral for hundreds of years, but because of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the Swedes and the Finns decided to join NATO. So they are the two newest members of NATO, and this is again something that will interest India and Sweden.
Absolutely. And then later, of course, is also going to be the roundtable, European Roundtable for Industry, that will include CEOs, and the focus is going to be on trade, isn't it? And, if we look at the bilateral trade, it reached $7.75 billion in 2025. So the focus, of course, is also going to be on strengthening that.
Yes, the president of the EU will also be there for that discussion at Gothenburg. So this is a very high-level meeting for which Prime Minister has been invited. He's not going to be in Sweden for a very long time, maximum of less than a day. But it promises to be a very fruitful one because a lot of things are under discussion. As I said, innovation, industry, defense, environment, agreement on trade, all of these things are extremely important for both countries.
Absolutely. And we're looking at visuals of the Prime Minister landing at the Gothenburg airport and then receiving a warm welcome. In the visuals also, of course, along with the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister of Sweden. There'll be bilateral talks held between both the leaders, and later, like Srinjoy was pointing out, the focus will also be on the European Roundtable for Industry, which would in fact be attended, which will be attended by the CEOs. Srinjoy continues to be with us on the broadcast. Srinjoy, what's the significance here, of strengthening the India-Sweden relation in terms of the geopolitical shuffle that we are witnessing?
Yes, of course, it's important. As I mentioned, Sweden was a neutral country for years and years, along with Finland. And then, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Sweden and Finland decided that it would be important to join NATO. And they joined NATO. Of course, the future of NATO has been questioned by President Donald Trump himself. But nevertheless, when they did join, it seemed like a very good idea. Because if Russia could attack Ukraine, it could also attack Finland, as it did in 1939. That is what was generally felt by the Swedes and the Finns, which is why NATO became, and joining NATO became such an issue. And they did join NATO. That's, of course, the first thing. Secondly, apart from that, there are further issues now that have developed. Basically, the troubles between America and Europe, that is being looked at as well. And naturally, as an important European country, Sweden has a say, Sweden has a part. So for the joint security of Europe, this is something the Swedes will play a role here. And if India is involved, at least in these discussions, it would certainly help India, because India could also do something about it. So all of these things are on the agenda, are on the table. Apart from security, as I said, innovation, green technology, education, even trade and industry, because after the FTA, investment and trade with all European countries, with EU countries, will be much easier.
And then Sweden, of course, is a country that, just like India, believes and champions multilateralism. Multilateralism is something that has been, the focus as far as the changing global structure is concerned.
Yes, of course. As I said, Sweden was a neutral country, one of the few neutral countries in Europe for years and years. And it's only very recently, after 2002, that the Swedes suddenly woke up and said, look here, we have to look after ourselves and we have to see if we can join NATO. But apart from that, they have very good relations with India, and India has benefited from some Swedish technologies. The Carl Gustaf that I'd spoken about earlier is a very successful weapon and widely used by the Indian Army.
Stay on with us. Let's focus on the visuals for a moment. Those are visuals when the Prime Minister landed in Gothenburg. On the other hand, you see how the Prime Minister's plane was escorted by Swedish jets. Those two visuals on your screens talk about the significance of this relationship. When the Prime Minister landed at Gothenburg airport, he was given a warm welcome. The presence of the Swedish Prime Minister, Mr. Kristersson, can be also seen in these visuals. There'll be a bilateral level, delegation level talks that will take place. And then the Prime Minister will also be interacting with the members of the European Roundtable for Industry.
बहुत ही सौभाग्य की बात है कि हम यहाँ पे उपस्थित हैं और सभी में जो उल्लास है, सब everybody is so happy. I mean बहुत ही खुशी का माहौल है and we are really grateful कि हमको ये मौका मिला उनसे मिलने का. I mean हमको मिलने वाला उनसे मिलने का. Last I think वो 2018 में आए थे. So अभी का जो माहौल है, मोदी जी की जो leadership quality वो हम सबको पता है. So we are so happy that he is coming here.
We are very honored in Sweden and Gothenburg especially that we have this honorable visit. And I think that India and Sweden, if we connect these two countries, we can make wonders in the world.
हम लोग बहुत उत्साहित है कि मोदी जी आ रहे हैं. हमारे लिए बहुत सौभाग्य की बात है. हमने सोचा नहीं था कि गॉथनबर्ग में आ सकते हैं मोदी जी. Once in a lifetime opportunity है हमारे लिए.
ये ड्रीम कम ट्रू है हमारे लिए.
So the last time the Prime Minister visited Sweden was in 2018. Back then, the Prime Minister went to Stockholm. This time, he is in Gothenburg. And as far as this visit is concerned, it represents a transformative moment, something that links historical trust with future-ready economic and strategic goals. The focus will also be on green transition, AI, resilient supply chains, and emerging technologies. India and Sweden are not only addressing developmental needs, but also providing a model for North-South cooperation in a period of exceptional global danger.